Hi, this is Susan from Cochino Design Studio. Welcome to our next Garment Designer Pattern Quickie. This time we're going to feature a fingertip length jacket with an inseam pocket at the side. Here you can see the pattern and the basic structure of it. I always begin by building an analysis. So I'm planning for an overlapping front. I'm planning to have a box pleat stitched down in the center back for about 4 inches, and I will use a style that has an attached sleeve. Then I like to add numbers to my thoughts. So I'm going to go for a length of 30 inches, a neck width of 8.5, a front neck depth of 7.5. I'll plan for about a 3.5 inch overlap at front and a center back extension of 2 inches deep on the fold, which will be 4 inches that will be built into a box pleat. Here I am in Garment Designer, and this time I'm going to work with a custom size. So I'm going to go into custom and I'm going to choose myself, one of my more current sets of measurements. You can see I'm not a perfect figure. And then I'm going to go into display pieces and choose to have both fronts displayed but in an independent mode. And at the same time, since the sleeve is built in one with the body of the garment, I'm going to turn the sleeve off here. So this gets me this far, and then the next thing I like to do is to put in the length so I can see everything in proportion. And I will do 30 inches for the garment length. It's fingertip length on my body. And so now I can have the 2 fronts and a half back. So I'm ready to go and start progressing with the styling. If you click inside a piece, you can see all the segments that construct the piece. You can see which ones are straight and which ones are curved. And then those can be adjusted, which we will probably be doing some of that in a little bit. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and do the attached sleeve, because now I can see exactly how this jacket is going to look. Usually I work in a clockwise manner, so the next thing I'd want to do is to get my neckline correct. So I'm going to use a V neckline with the high curved neckline. But I want to be able to have the width I chose, which was an 8.5 inch wide neckline. So I'm just going to click on the back and I'm going to pull it here. I could have easily clicked on the front, but it's a little easier to read the measurement on the back. You will probably get this warning, and I'm just going to suppress it. It doesn't like the angle right here at the back, and there is a way to go have it tell you more explicitly. So what I usually like to do is lower my center front and or back, always the back here, a little bit further. What you want is a 90-degree angle right here and right here, because that means when you sew the shoulder seam of this garment together, you will have a beautiful transition. So that has corrected that problem. I often wait till I'm done and do all the angle corrections at the end. So we are aiming for, I'm a little too wide. I wanted 8.5, which means I need to be 4.25. Notice how I'm sliding on the slope. I'm using my arrow keys now. There, now I've got it, and I'll just go up 1. So 4.25 is 8.5. I wanted my front neck about 7.5 inches deep. So now I'm at the point where I need to do things to the front that I'm not going to do to the back. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to turn off front back symmetry. You get there by double clicking on the S icon. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to raise the front neck just a hair. And then I'm going to actually kind of flip this curve a little. But I want to add the extension for the overlap of the front jacket. So I'm going to click on the center front, and I'm taking note of the width of the garment. It's 12.75 inches. And I want to add 3.5 inches to that. So that's going to be 15.5, 16.25 is where I'm heading. So I'm just going to slide this over and then check a reading. I'm not there yet. Now I'm just using my arrow keys to nudge. Whoops. And now I have that. If I want, I can turn on the grid. So you could actually 1, 2, 3.5. You could count how many inches you've added. But usually when I'm working, I only have the grid on for counting and checking ease and things like that. At this point, I may want to, scoop out this neckline a little bit more and just style it. And then what I like to do now is just to see how this overlap is going to look in the garment. So I'll click on one side, and I'm just using a shortcut. I'm pressing A for adjacent. So now my jacket has been put into adjacent mode, which allows me to see how that overlap looks when worn, and I like it. So I'm just going to click in here and press I for independent again. So I've got the neckline done. The sleeve length will already be adjusted for me. If I want to go right down to my wrist, that's what I'll do. At this point, I might choose to make it wider, but if I do, I have to remember to turn symmetry. So let's just go do that. Well, yes, we will. We're going to make our cuff a little bit deeper, and then we might choose to want to pull this down and maybe re-arc this curve. You have all kinds of control in that. And so we'll let that be. And now I can put the grid on again and see how many inches of ease I have between my hip and the side seam, and I would say that's almost 2 inches, a 2-inch pinch, which would be a total of 8 inches, and that's good. So I'll just use a shortcut to turn the grid off. So I'd say the front is essentially done, and the only thing missing is on the back. I want to add an extension for the box plate. So once again, I'm going to go turn off front back symmetry, click away, click on the center back, go to additions, add an extension. If you're being good, you will name this center back extension. And I want it to be 2 inches, so you type in 2, and it adds the extension. So everything in the body of the garment is now complete, except that now we will add the pocket. Pockets can be found in the extras menu. This is where you go to dress up a pattern or a garment. So I'm going to slide down to the pocket area and choose front left. This will open up a pocket, whichever one I had used last in the session. So I'm going to use an outer pocket rounded, and I'm going to select it, but then click on an edge so I can drag it over to the side seam. And then I'm going to elongate, and then I'm going to move this over to match my side seam. I could go down into the bottoms of the patterns where skirts and pants are and grab an inseam pocket, or I can just simply build one up here. But I'm just trying to demonstrate the use of click and drag, so we're going to do it this way. So I'm pulling this over. You're going to think I'm a little crazy, but I know that I have control over these curves, and we've got another curve control point down here. If you want to zoom in to see things better, you can press Command or Control 2, and that will zoom you in to the, and then you go find your area. And so now I can see a little better, what I'm doing here. And then to zoom back out, let me just move this over. Zoom back out, I'm going to do Command or Control 0, and now I can see here. So let's just say I'm saying this is good enough. I would spend more time, but let's just say. And I'm going to go separate the pattern piece, because then I can see the dimensions, I can confirm, and then I'll print a separate pattern piece. So at this stage, we're ready for all the additions one puts on a pattern before printing it. So we're going to add facings, hems, and seam allowances. So let's do facings first. I'm going to grab the front, but I don't want the back, right? The facing is only on the front and around the neck. So I'm going to click away. I'm going to go turn off front back symmetry. I'm going to select the front. I'm going to hold the shift key, select the neckline, and select the back, and then go to additions, add facing, and I could name it center front and then neck, and I'm going to leave it by default at 2 1/4 inches. For hems, I'm going to click on the front, hold the shift key, and grab the back, and then add hem, and I'll let this be, I'll just say lower hem, and I'll just let it be 2 inches. I'm going to want to have hems on all the sleeves. I'm holding the shift key again. Addition, add hem, and we're just going to let these be 1, and I won't get fancy on the naming. And then all that's left now is seam allowances. So I'm going to go to the Additions menu, Global Seam Allowances. I always take 1/2 inch. I could have 1/4 inch, some places 1/2 inch elsewhere. But I don't want a seam allowance on my center back here. So I'm going to select on the center back, which it's knowing I'm talking about an extension. I'm going to go to the Options or Additions menu and choose Custom Seam Allowance and type 0. And so now I've taken that away. So my garment is now complete. The pattern is ready. At this stage, I would save. Again, I could go into the Options menu and use the header fields to name the project, which I had done earlier. So it's got this name. I put in the fabric. All of this will print on the pattern for me. So everything is done there. Usually at this point, I will print what you're seeing here in the screen out in landscape mode to have a schematic of the project. I could choose to go turn off the right front, just so I'm not using as much real estate on the screen. And now let's just say I'm ready to print the paper pattern. Usually what I do then is I turn off the dimensions, I turn on the grid, I go into final pattern mode, which will put notches where they belong. And at this point then I go to scale to actual size. And then I can go back to display again and ask for a print preview, because then it shows the paginations for all the pages. And right now this pattern would take 37 pages. I often will go in and confirm if it might be less if I switch my orientation in portrait mode. It's going to take more. So I'd be much better off to stick with this one in landscape mode. These you can tape together. I also can increase my paper size and look at the size of the pattern so that I'm printing out 1 pattern page per sheet, or I can set it up to do projection sewing. So there's several ways of outputting. But basically, that's it. We have completed the garment. Let's go take a look at some of the finishings. In constructing the garment, I decided to use Hong Kong seam finishes because I did not want to line this particular project. So I cut strips on the bias, approximately 1.5 to 1 3/4 inches wide. I stitched it onto the edge of the facing in this case. Pressed it over and back behind, and then did a zigzag stitch on top. And you can see from this photo how fun that looks when the inside of the jacket is showing. I also use the lining fabric that I use for Hong Kong seam finishes for the pocket. Not necessarily super functional choice, but a necessary one since I didn't have any excess fashion fabric. You will also see that on the sleeve, I needed to add an extension to a shortened sleeve because of the width of my fabric. It didn't allow for me to cut a full width all the way to the wrist of the garment. So I spliced the sleeve, and in order to make that look like it belonged, I used a piece of bias tape and wrapped it around as part of the joining process, which you can see here. So that completes our pattern quickie. I hope you enjoyed it. Take the time to walk along with me and do it, pausing and starting as you need, just for the practice of learning to use your software. Feel free to like us here on YouTube and to follow us so that you will receive notices of other quickies and other videos that we make. So thank you so much, and happy sewing and or knitting.